You carry our family's power with you. Do not open this pot unless they break you completely.
And there were no clothes in it.
37 people fell to their knees at the exact same moment. A chief who had never bowed to anyone, his proud wife, 4 sisters who had spent 3 years tormenting one woman, their husbands, their children, 37 people kneeling. And the reason they were kneeling stood calmly in front of them, a woman dressed in white, holding a small empty clay pot, and in her eyes there was no anger left, only judgment.
No one in that compound dared to speak, because the woman they had mocked, humiliated, and starved for 3 long years had finally opened the one thing her grandmother warned her never to open. And once it was opened, there was no closing it again. Welcome to Zara's African Folktale, where every story carries the weight of the ancestors. Tonight, we travel to the land of the Igbo people, where pride can destroy a family, silence can become a weapon, and the woman you mistreat today might become the spirit you fear tomorrow.
This is the story of Adaeze. Sit down, lock your door, and whatever you do, do not look away. Long ago, in the village of Oguta, where the river ran so clear you could see the faces of your ancestors in it, there lived a young man named Chukwuemeka. Chukwuemeka was the first son of Chief Okoye, a proud man, a loud man, a man who believed the world existed only to serve his family. Chukwuemeka was handsome, he was tall, and he had one terrible habit. He always did exactly what his father told him. One dry season, Chukwuemeka traveled to the neighboring village to trade yams. And there, by the market, he saw her. Her name was Adaeze. She was not from Oguta. She was from a smaller, quieter village across the river. Her people were not rich. They had no chief. They had no title. They had only their land, their dignity, and their silence. But Adaeze herself, Adaeze was something else entirely. She walked like the ground itself respected her. She spoke with a calm that made even elders listen. And when she laughed, it was the kind of laugh that made you feel like the sun had shifted position just for you. Chukwuemeka was finished. He went home, told his father, and said, "I have found my wife."
Chief Okoye looked at his son for a long time. Where is she from? Across the river, father, the village of Newi Ulo, the chief spat on the ground. Those people have nothing, no land, no title, no lineage. You want to bring poverty into my compound. But Chukwuemeka, for the first and only time in his life, refused to obey his father. He married Adaeze anyway. And the moment that bride price was paid, the trouble began.
But what Chief Okoye did not know, what none of them knew, was that Adaeze had not come alone. Something had followed her across the river. Something very old and very patient. Before Adaeze crossed that river, her grandmother had taken her aside and pressed something wrapped in dark cloth into her hands. A small clay pot, sealed with beeswax, heavy for its size. Her grandmother held her face and said, "You carry our family's power with you. Do not open this pot unless they break you completely." Adaeze had asked, "And if I open it?" Her grandmother looked at her with eyes that held no comfort. "Then there will be no closing it." Somewhere beyond the 7 hills, a dibia would later say he felt something ancient stir the night Adaeze crossed the water. He sat up in the dark, looked towards the river, and whispered to himself, "Someone just carried fire into a house of dry wood."
From the first morning Adaeze entered that compound, Chief Okoye's family made sure she felt like a stranger in her own home. Chukwuemeka's mother, Lolo Ogochukwu, refused to greet her. She spoke about Adaeze loudly, as if Adaeze could not hear. "Is this the goat my son brought home? She looks like she has never eaten 2 good meals in 1 week." The sisters, there were 4 of them. They were worse. They gave Adaeze the smallest room, the one near the back where rats ran at night. They gave her the heaviest chores. They called her to fetch water at the crack of dawn, before the village was even awake. And when guests came to eat, they served Adaeze last. Sometimes they did not serve her at all. Sometimes, when the sisters mocked her, Adaeze simply smiled. Not a weak smile. Not a smile that begged for mercy. The kind of smile that made people feel uncomfortable. The kind that made the sisters glance at each other quickly and look away. They could never explain why. They only knew that something about that smile unsettled them deeply. They should have listened to that feeling. Now, let me tell you about one afternoon. One afternoon that broke something quietly inside Adaeze that never fully healed. She had woken up before sunrise that day. She pounded the yam herself. She ground the pepper herself. She cooked a large pot of ofe onugbu, bitter leaf soup. The kind that takes hours. The kind that fills the whole compound with a smell that makes even your enemies hungry. When it was time to eat, Lolo Ogochukwu took the ladle and served everyone.
The chief, the sisters, the visitors, even the children. When Adaeze stepped forward and reached for a bowl, Lolo Ogochukwu slapped her hand away. Not gently, hard. Servants do not eat before guests. The whole compound went quiet. Adaeze did not cry. She did not speak. She simply stepped back, folded her hands, and stood there while everyone ate the food she had cooked with her own 2 hands. That night, she went to her small room, drank water, and slept hungry.
And Chukwuemeka, her husband, had been sitting right there. He saw everything. The slap, the silence, the way Adaeze stepped back without a word. For a moment, his hand tightened around his spoon. It would have taken only 1 sentence to stop it. 1 sentence. But he looked at his father, and he looked at the ground, and then he ate his soup. Adaeze endured it all with a face as smooth as still water. The insults, the hunger, the loneliness of sleeping beside a man who had chosen his father's approval over his wife's dignity. People in the village whispered, "That woman is either very wise or carrying something very dangerous." They had no idea how right they were. One evening, a very old woman appeared at Adaeze's door. Nobody had ever seen her before. She was bent like a tree in the wind. Her eyes were the color of ash. She leaned close and whispered in Adaeze's ear, "For pot remembers." Then she was gone. And for the first time since she entered that compound, Adaeze smiled deeply. That same smile, the one that made people feel uncomfortable. For 3 years, she swallowed her pain in the dark until the night they went too far. The night sky turned the color of blood. Dogs refused to bark. Crickets fell silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath, as if the whole earth knew something was about to happen and wanted to watch. It was the night of the red moon. Chief Okoye called a family gathering, and in front of the whole compound, in front of visitors, in front of the village elders who had come to share palm wine, he told Chukwuemeka to take a second wife. He said Adaeze was barren.
Useless. A woman who had given his son nothing. He said, send her back across the river. She is a waste of a bride price. Adaeze stood at the edge of the gathering. She heard every word. She looked at her husband. And Chukwuemeka, that tall, handsome, spineless man, he bowed his head. He said nothing, not one word to defend her.
Adaeze turned around. She walked to her room. She knelt down. She dug with her bare hands until she felt the clay pot beneath her fingers. She pulled it out. She looked at it for a long, long time. Then she broke the seal. The water did not spill. It lifted itself out of the pot, thick, black, moving like something that had been asleep for centuries and had just opened its eyes. The room grew cold. The flame of the oil lamp bent sideways, as if something had breathed on it.
And for a brief moment, Adaeze had something whispering inside the darkness. She could not make out the words, but she understood the meaning. It was ready. Nobody in the compound slept well that night. Chief Okoye dreamt of chains. His wife dreamt of water rising past her knees. The 4 sisters dreamt of running and never moving forward. When dawn broke, they all woke up.
And they could not speak. Not one of them could form a single word. Their mouths opened, sounds came out, but the sounds were not language. They were something else, something low and guttural and animal. Chukwuemeka woke up and tried to call for his father. What came out of his mouth made him clap his hand over it in horror. One by one, they stumbled into the compound. Chief Okoye, Lolo Ogochukwu, all 4 sisters and their husbands and their children old enough to have participated in the cruelty.
37 people in total, standing in the compound, unable to speak, unable to live. Their minds were clear. They understood everything, but their bodies did not belong to them anymore. And then Adaeze walked out. She was dressed in white. Her hair was loose. In her hand was the empty clay pot. She walked to the center of the compound, looked at every single face, and said, I did not come here to be your servant. I came here as a wife. You made me less than the dust on your sandals.
You took my dignity. You ate my silence. And the one man who should have stood for me bowed his head like a coward. She paused. Today, you will learn what it means to carry someone else's burden. She raised the clay pot above her head and she threw it down. It shattered. And from the broken pieces, something rose, a thick black smoke that moved like it had a mind. It entered the ears of every person in that compound, all 37 of them, one by one.
When the smoke cleared, nobody moved. The compound was completely still. Then Chief Okoye, the man who had never bowed to anyone, the man who had ruled that compound like a god, tried to stand straight. His legs trembled. His back bent slowly until his knees touched the earth. The man who had never bowed to anyone bowed. And the moment he went down, every single person behind him followed, one after another, like trees falling in a storm.
37 people on their knees in their own compound. From that morning forward, they were bound to her service. Not with ropes, not with chains, with something far worse. The truth of their own guilt. They cooked her meals. They fetched her water. They swept her floor. And they felt every humiliation the way she had felt theirs, multiplied. An elder
who watched from outside the compound, shook his head slowly and said, "The ground has memory. Whatever you plant in it will grow."
For 30 days, this continued. On the 31st day, the Dibia arrived. The same old man from beyond the 7 hills who had felt the spirit awaken the night Adaeze crossed the river. He looked at Adaeze and said, "Daughter, the spirit you awakened does not know the difference between justice and revenge. It only knows hunger. Release them now, or it will finish them, and then start on you."
She said, "And if I release them, what then?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Then you must choose what kind of woman you are." That night, Adaeze sat alone and thought about one thing her grandmother had whispered to her long ago, long before the pot, long before any of this. The greatest power is not the one that destroys. It is the one that decides when to stop. In the morning, she released them. One by one, she called each name, and as she called it, the binding lifted. Chief Okoye fell on his face before her. Lolo Ogochukwu wept, genuinely wept, for the first time anyone had seen. And Chukwuemeka crawled to her feet and said, "Forgive me." She looked down at him. "Stand up." He stood. "I forgive you, but I will not stay." She packed her things and left that same day. She did not look back. They say when she stepped onto the other side of the river, the water behind her went completely still. Not a ripple, not a sound. As if the world itself had exhaled. Chief Okoye never spoke loudly again. Chukwuemeka never remarried. The 4 sisters raised their daughters differently and told them this story every year on the night of the red moon. And Adaeze lived long. She lived free. Some elders say the spirit returned to the river the day she walked away. Others say it still walks the land, waiting for another woman who has swallowed too much silence. Some say she was too merciful. Others say she should have left them exactly as they were. Tell me honestly in the comments, if you were Adaeze, would you have released them or not? And if you are new here, welcome to Zara's African Folktale, where every story has a heartbeat. Subscribe, like, and share this with someone who needs to hear it today. I will see you in the next story. Stay rooted, stay free.